welcome to Legally Speaking, with me Tarun Nangia. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic, the topic of drones. It first came into limelight in India when 2014, a pizza seller, an outlet, used it to deliver a pizza in the city of Mumbai in Maharashtra. And suddenly the authorities in India woke up that there are no rules and regulations to control or regulate the use of drones in India. Then there were various theories which may as well be true, that drones can be used to assassinate people, drones can be used for surveillance. I may have a drone designed as a pigeon to set outside your balcony and keep a check on you. All sorts of things are possible because these are new emerging areas of technology and there are actually no laws to regulate it. There is no policy. And in such emerging areas, the field of drones itself, as technology grows, the field is changing so fast, the technology is itself developing so fast that it's very difficult for the authorities to play catch up. And we are at an interesting juncture today where the Ministry of Civil Aviation has issued regulations which are going to be effective 1st of December 2018 for operation of remotely piloted aircraft system, which in common parlance could be clubbed into the drone category as we say it. To discuss, I have with me Advocate Khushbu Jain. I also have with me Anant Padmanabhan. He is a fellow with the Center for Policy Research. I'll start with Khushbu. Your opening comments on this emerging area. Things are a bit unclear, isn't it, as of now?
Tarun, that's bound to be unclear as the technology is pretty new. People, let's say a decade before, weren't aware about anything whereas unmanned aerial vehicle is, or there can be a drone delivery. That was something unheard of. So when a technology is growing, the same way the law has to grow. So when it's emerging, law is evolving. So at the same time, you can't have a clear-cut law in that regard because the crime also takes place. A new crime would come up. And then you think, oh, that kind of crime can also take place. So let's come up a regulation on that regard.
But I have a follow-up question, Khushbu. In India, there is generally fear. Authorities are generally fearful. They want to shut everything when anything starts. So when there was uplinking and live TV, the government didn't allow it. So we had deferred broadcasting because the bureaucrats thought that no, uplinking we cannot allow. Live broadcast we cannot allow. So we had deferred broadcasting where broadcasts were deferred by a few minutes or a minute or so. Do you think we are actively considering drone as we can be at par with the world? Because we hear of food deliveries via drones in China. There may be more.
So as rightly said, we do have, as an Indian, we do have that setback that the moment something new comes up, we try to shut it. That happened and we are paying a little, problem with that regard, because if you compare US or other countries, let's say Switzerland, or even let's compare a country like Rwanda, they've got beautiful drone delivery based systems, or they are having technology related to that which help them out in health sector, infrastructure, and a number of other technology related aspects in that. That advancement we are still lacking. But yes, now that we have come up, when the technology was going up, it was very much important looking into the criteria that privacy was part of an issue. Threat to a country's security was at a stake. So at that time, the best is to know about the technology and areas involving that. So the blanket no was required. That was in 2014, as you said, that when authorities got up in 2014 looking at something, a delivery of a pizza, or Amazon's announcement that we're going to do drone-based delivery systems to people. At that time, authority got up. But that's not just India. A lot of countries face the same issues because this was growing so rapidly that you were not aware that what kind of an impact it would have socially and in other aspects also. Let's take its security, military aspects. As you said that even terrorist use of drones. So there has to be a kind of a stoppage to that to know about it and implement it. And rightly, 2018, now the new policy come up is more or large covering all the aspects in that area.
So we are progressing.
We are progressing, yes, absolutely.
So as Khushbu, and I'll take it on from where Khushbu says, finally we are having a regulation from 1st of December 2018, which will maybe help and aid use of drones in various areas, be it agriculture, to photography, to infrastructure asset maintenance, and so on. I'll go across to Mr. Padmanabhan. Your comments on this issue.
Right. So I think the first aspect to think about is that unmanned vehicle systems are not new. The technology has been around for a while. From the 1970s, in fact, the US Air Force has been resisting innovation and research and development in the United States, right? ICAO has been thinking for a while about remotely piloted aircraft systems. So ICAO had already come out, the International Civil Aviation Organization had already come out with international guidelines and advisories on unmanned aircraft systems. So from 2005 onwards, even that conversation is happening at a global level. The difficulty, so the unique thing about India is that we have been late to this conversation at the international level. We've really never sent any representations to be part of ICAO delegations and think more seriously about the technology. And today we face a scenario where 70% of the world's drones are sold by one Chinese company.
70% of the world's drones by one
Chinese company, DJI, right? So the market leadership position has been taken over by China. Perhaps it could be because China has a very different way of regulating new technologies. Gene editing across the board, you see that with China. And maybe we are a democratic system, we have these constitutional values, so we have to think more carefully about rolling out new technologies. But I do agree with you on the point that when it comes to innovation, India has always had a difficulty, right, in terms of, one, addressing the knowledge gap. Information asymmetry is a huge issue between the bureaucracy and the technocracy and the technology industry, right? Today there is at least some conversation happening on that. The second thing is the agility with which you need to regulate. The Aircraft Act is 1934.
1934?
Right? Yeah, it's 1934. If you look at Digital India and the whole telecom regime, the Telegraph Act, which still governs your telecom sector, is 1885. So these are not unique to drones. I mean, across the board,
I think pointing out.
Yeah, there is a sort of lag, right? And today we are talking about some of these things. For instance, data protection is a very good example of that. Finally, the country has woken up to realize that, look, you need some legal regime for personal data protection. Part of the reason is because European Union has its own GDPR and so on. So to cut a long story short, I think there is an awareness challenge, there is an agility challenge, and the third is there's an engineering challenge. What works in Australia may not work in India when it comes to drones. I mean, we can say that, oh, Australia is very progressive drone regulations, but look at the populous nature of that country versus the population density in India, right? So when you're thinking about technologies that work across different, countries, right, you also have to think about the local context. So drone technology has great use cases in India, but at the same time, population density is a huge concern in India. So if you're using drones for delivery, for instance, Amazon is doing it in London. They're working with the regulator. They're working in what you call a regulatory sandboxed environment where the regulator is closely tracking what Amazon is doing with delivery, looking at the data emerging from delivery in the city of London, and then saying, look, these are the concerns, these are areas where you don't have to worry too much. We will then shape the regulations based on what the data is from the ground. So we need to start thinking more in that direction. Some of it is now happening. For instance, Digital Sky is the platform on which the Ministry of Civil Aviation has indicated you're going to build up these regulations. So it's at one level you have the laws and you have all the property, privacy, all these concerns which need to be addressed. At the other, you're also talking about technology which has a platform like GST, for instance.
Okay.
There's a platform. Which
So good point. Now, what are drones like? Drones can be varying in size from small, which may carry a few 100 grams of payload capacity, to drones which can carry kilos and kilos of material. That would render itself to a wide range of applications, and therein comes the regulation. We'll go to Khushbu and ask her what are the possible applications that it can render itself to, and then the regulation aspect too, if you can deal with that.
So as you said, that drones are being defined into 5 categories, and at the same time the Digital Sky network which you're talking about, that's a new app which is going to come live from 1st of December, where any kind of registration you want to do for, whereas the privacy concern is there, whereas security concern is there, there are few mandates which has come up with this regulation, which talks about that you need to have a unique identification number. Any buyer or a user had to register itself. Then the pilot has to register. Then the station from where it is going to go, that is RPAS, that has to be registered properly. It's non-transferable. Even if it's damaged, the UIN cannot be transferred to any third person. So this gives a little safety aspect as to if something has onus with regard to, the responsibility comes. You just can't pick up as a toy and keep on getting into somebody else's ground or a bedroom or in a layman's thing or, in somebody else's property. Yeah, absolutely. So, looking into that aspect, this has come up as, one can track. So, and every time you need to fly, you need to apply to digital sky point. It's an automated response. There are again 3 categories. That's 5 categories which talks about nano, micro, small.
These are the type of drones?
These are the type of, they have categorized 5 categories so that whereas nano is concerned, there is no kind of a requirement. You need not even get a unit identification number. The only thing is anything you're flying above in the local area, in the private area, not in your internal premises, inform a local police about that. And any kind of mishap you do with that, yes, you do have IPC and other regulations.
I'm sorry to interject at this point, but every time to inform the police before I use the drone?
That's, it's not necessitated, but it's always better to do that. Whereas nano category is concerned, anything above nano has a proper places to come in, whereas government, home ministry is concerned, whereas defense ministry is concerned, whereas DGCA is concerned.
Yes. I may want to, fly my drone 5 times a day. How do I do that?
No, that's absolutely. So when it comes to commercial, when you want to fly it for your recreational purpose or for your photography or for your, the wedding thing, need not take a permission. It's idle to inform the local police, but it has to be a nano category and it has to, it need not be above 50. No, it need not be above 50 feet. So that's the only category which is exempted from all kind of.
People use it in marriages and so on.
Yes, absolutely. But again, 50 feet is the category. You cannot flow above that level.
Fly above 50 feet, which is about 5-floor building.
And there are a lot of other areas which are restricted. For example, religious places where a lot of public is there. You can't use it, your stuff, without informing the police. Anything in 5-kilometer radius of airport, 50-kilometer of radius of LOC, line of actual control.
All those things have to be
There are a lot of restrictions. Vijay Chowk, secretarial offices of every state.
Every state.
Yeah. So these are few restrictions areas. You'll get the list of entire thing again on the same platform which we talk about.
Okay.
Pretty friendly platform it has come up that you just apply and it's automated.
Even so automated response. I just have to inform the mobile app.
Once you have to register yourself, then you inform on the automated.
That's a very interesting thing. Both Mr. Padmanabhan and Khushbu shared it with me that there is a mobile application which is Sky.
Digital Sky.
Digital Sky, wherein you go and you share your details that you want to use the drone for this purpose, and then you can use it. And taking this discussion ahead, the press release put out by the Ministry of Civil Aviation in this regard stated that the preparation of drone regulations through a civil aviation requirement has taken multiple years because drone technologies have been evolving very rapidly. Many countries are still experimenting with their drone regulations and no ICAO standards have been developed. India's security environment necessitates extra precautions. Anant, your comments on this?
Right. So I think, yeah, definitely, there is an issue of precaution, and as I mentioned, the population density is a huge issue. The fact that it's a country of 1.3 billion people and bad actors.
So as you said that it's different for Australia. And
yeah, that sort of, so that definitely you have to build, Indian standards and so on. But I also think you need a keen eye on the innovation side of the story. You cannot let this technology, be one where India is not taking a leadership position. I think, for instance, on the Make in India iteration, the second version of Make in India, drones, robotics and Industry 4.0 is a big part of our thinking, policy imagination, right? So if you want that policy imagination to happen, then you have to think about how the technology is going to evolve. And interestingly, even this particular regulation, when Minister Suresh Prabhu released it, he said this is regulation 1.0.
1.0.
Yeah, that's it's good, refreshing to see that. It's actually refreshing to see that.
So it's an evolving process.
Yes, and that policy makers are also thinking of this as 1.0 and that there are further iterations possible. Now, where could these iterations come? The first thing is remotely piloted versus completely unmanned aircraft systems. Currently, it is only remotely piloted under these guidelines. But the technology is moving very quickly to absolutely autonomous, fully autonomous drone systems which use swarm technology. They coordinate and talk to each other like autonomous cars and so on. So the same autonomous systems are being developed, and we could reach a point where the regulations will have to bring that into consideration. The second is beyond visual line of sight. So currently it is only visual line of sight, which is a big barrier when it comes to the delivery drone industry. Because when you are delivering, using drones, you need it to go beyond your line of sight. And currently the regulations are not contemplating that, but I see a possibility where 2.0 or 3.0 would actually be thinking about these things. But we have to think fast, we have to see where the technology is headed in terms of geofencing, detect and avoid systems. So if technology itself can provide answers to some of the concerns that both Khushbu and I have been talking about, right? Privacy, property, trespass, nuisance, all of that. And if technology can respond to it, then the regulations have to integrate it. There should be some mechanism. The third very interesting thing in these guidelines is the possibility of testing sites. So they have increased the number of testing sites to about, I think, 20 testing sites where you can do R&D, you can deploy the technology, you can see whether, what the data is in terms of its concerns.
So we'll take a short break at this juncture. My interest is peaked because a lot of this equipment currently in India is imported. Anant also pointed out that 70% of drones all over the world are manufactured by one company. It's an evolving process, but what I want to understand is the security aspect, A, and second, because we don't have any, if at least to my knowledge, there is no innovation on any companies who are designing and developing and selling drones in India. So there is, so to speak, no domestic industry of drones in India. After the break, we'll discuss with Khushbu and Anant on this more. Welcome back. Just before the break, we were acquainted with a few things on the drone ecosystem in India. Khushbu pointed out about that you don't actually need permissions to have those nano drones, which can be used for local purposes as a hobby or in marriage parties. That's up to a limit of 50 feet. That is what she shared with us. And then, of course, there is the Digital Sky platform where you need to go and upload the details when you use bigger drones of bigger sizes because payloads go up to a few kilos. I'll go to Khushbu. What kind of applications do you foresee that the government may need to regulate? Because as you said, I think some time back, that people use it for even blood deliveries in remote areas?
Absolutely. So let's take an example of a country like Rwanda. Thousands of patients have been benefited where they have delivered blood samples through drone technology.
Blood samples?
Yes, blood
samples through drone deliveries.
Drone delivery. Because, these kind of things need a lot of environment with regard to being at certain temperature and everything, and at the remotest to remote area, it helps you out. Another thing, there's a project of India. I'll just give a very basic data that 7 out of 10 children are facing lack of vaccinations. They are not even provided of vaccinations. 7 out of 10 in India.
Jeez.
Looking at that, Government of India implemented another project, Indradhanush project, for the providing vaccinations, and they've started providing vaccinations. It does reach, but it reaches to the local instructor out there. From there, reaching to the specific targets, it becomes a problem, and another problem comes is the temperature, because those vaccines need to have a specific temperature to be maintained, and from there to reach to that remotest to remote area becomes an issue. The same thing if we do it via drone delivery, it becomes absolutely easy and effective. There are a lot of other companies such as DHL, and I don't want to name, but they have come up with delivery.
No, what I want to understand is A, the use of technology, B, the regulation, and is India active? Because if countries like Rwanda, if they are doing it, I understand what Anand says, that it's a country of billion people and there are other allied issues, but do you think we need to now play catch up?
So let's divide this with regard to government using it. There was never a restriction, whereas government. Yes. In military, we've been using from ages. Yes. As he said, the technology, it's not new. It's been there from ages. Yes. So we have been using, whereas our military purpose is concerned, we have been using, if you remember, we are delivering food and other things through aerial drone-related things. Yes. The government using it, yes, absolutely fine. But the moment we become a private entities coming in play, regulation has to be required. Because see the threat. Let's see just a very basic example with regard to nano. I can literally use that for threat purpose. I can throw bombs. That has happened in countries like recent country, Germany has imposed penalty on a private player of 250,000 euros.
So even it can be used to throw bombs, do snooping, surveillance, assassinations, killing people.
This is accepted by Delhi police. The October month is banned for any kind of flying of drones. Entire October month is banned. So you just can't ban in a month, that entire month you cannot fly anything in the territory of Delhi.
That's a very important point. Delhi police has banned flying for an entire month, and as Khushbu says, you cannot have a blanket ban. You need to have regulations. That's the word. Anand, the government in its note also said that the UTM operates as a traffic regulator in the drone airspace and coordinates closely with the defense and civilian air traffic controllers to ensure that drones remain on approved flight paths. I would want to understand, because you said this is not Australia where the landmass is bigger than India and the population is about the city of Delhi. Yeah. You're talking of a country with 1/6 of humanity living, and if everybody, I mean, a huge chunk of the country's people use drones, you'll have buzzing drones all over the sky. Right. You think population brings in specific problems which are peculiar to India?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, so I think there are two parts again here. One is the very nature of aviation regulation, which works through controlled and uncontrolled airspaces.
Yes.
So with controlled airspaces, obviously, there are huge restrictions on flying there. And I don't think at the moment there is much envisaging of drone activity in the controlled airspaces. But because of the population dimension, even the uncontrolled airspaces bring other, set of concerns in India. So the controlled, uncontrolled division was only when you're talking about manned aircraft, which flies at a much higher, altitude. The closer you get to the ground, the conflict is much less with, various objects flying in the air and much more with objects on the land and objects which are flying very close to the land. And interestingly, when you start thinking about regulation there, state regulations will also become important. So one thing is to say that, there's an air traffic control management system, you file your flight plans and all of that. Now, this is entirely federal, the central regulations. But for instance, if Karnataka says, in, the city of Bangalore, if you are using drones for infrastructure projects, they have great use in infrastructure, right? Because there are many places where you can't easily get a person to go up.
So it's better to send a drone. So it increases safety.
Correct. And good granularity too, because camera systems are good. You can record the data. You can actually understand the repairs and so on.
Let's go to a very consumer-friendly feature, which I'll get Khushbu to answer about. Can we see Amazon delivering us deliveries via drones, or do you think that's a far-fetched dream for India?
That should come up soon. Switzerland has already allowed, it's approved. France has approved, Amazon only, that they are going to deliver. We should come up with the same. In the same regulation which you're reading, they do talk about there another task force which is looking forward for a regulation 2.0.
Okay.
So that's going to come up soon. So we should have something coming up very soon.
And speaking of regulation 2.0, the drone task force under the chairmanship of the MOS Jain Sinha will provide a draft recommendation of 2.0 which states certificate of safe and controlled operation for drone hardware and software, airspace management through automated operations linked to overall airspace management framework beyond visual line of operations. In common words, if you can't see the drone but you're still allowed to operate it via some remote facility where you can see where it is on a screen and then be allowed to operate drones. Contribution to establishing global standards and suggestions for modification of existing CAR or new CARs. How do you see this ecosystem developing? Because these notes have already been released to the media now.
Right. No, I think the ecosystem will develop naturally now, because once you have regulations of some kind, the 1.0, yes. Series B, Series C funding becomes easier for the industry. So that was a big problem. From 2014 to 18, a lot of interesting drone startups in Bangalore and Gurgaon. For instance, I can name a few, like Quidditch, for instance, was involved with the disaster relief in Nepal during the earthquake. And they've scaled a lot for IPL, for, the tourism industry.
That's a new area, disaster management.
Disaster management, Uttarakhand flood relief, Netra.
So you're dropping off food packets?
Yeah.
Or medicines?
And even finding people who have been lost in,
through cameras.
Areas. Yeah, through cameras.
So you don't need helicopters anymore. You can send drones.
Yeah, you can send drones, right? It's much easier to actually maneuver.
It even does help you, insurance companies, it does help that which area is exactly flood ridden, which is not, which areas, to give you a very timely based information that this are area still under the flood, this is not. And I'll just give a very recent example that we do face a problem, whereas railway mishaps do happen very frequently nowadays. So this kind of technology is, if it's been clubbed with the railway industry,
we might... the safety of railways?
Absolutely. When you have, timely information is being given to a department of railway that there has been some issues, let's say Amritsar issue, that something has been happening, this kind of things can be avoided. Why not? Absolutely, because it's all about time, right? Had the driver been aware about that has been there, he would have put an ice brake or something has been taken care.
So what is the sum and subtext of today's discussion? Of course, we'll come back and revisit this issue when the 2.0 regulations are released by Jayant Sinha, the Minister of State for Civil Aviation, and Suresh Prabhu, the Minister of Civil Aviation. But is India really keeping up the regulations with the vast applicability, as Khushbu pointed out about blood samples, and Anant pointed out about the applicability has to be different for India because simply we are 1/6 of humanity and not like Australia. But in the middle path, where Khushbu speaks about even safety of what you can say passengers in railways, that can be used by drone monitoring, and Anant also shared his opinion on disaster management, all these things. But thank you viewers for joining us on this episode. Thank you Khushbu and Anant for sparing your time and joining us for this episode of Legally Speaking. Thank you so much viewers. Thank you.